The issue of how we cast our ballots is back in the headlines. This week, President Trump pledged to end mail-in voting in the nation, aiming, he says, to restore honesty to elections ahead of next year's midterms. During his Oval Office meeting with Ukraine's President Zelensky, he repeated a series of false claims he made on social media earlier in the day.
We, as a Republican Party, are going to do everything possible that we get rid of mail-in ballots. We're going to start with an executive order that's being written right now by the best lawyers in the country to end mail-in ballots because they're corrupt. And you know that we're the only country in the world, I believe, I may be wrong, but just about the only country in the world that uses them because of what's happened. Massive fraud all over the place.
All right, correcting the president here, a count conducted by, this was conducted last year by the International Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance, found that 34 countries use mail-in voting, including Canada, Denmark, and Germany. Yesterday, 11Alive received a statement from the Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger's office, responding to the president's claim, saying Georgia's election security remains the gold standard. Photo ID for all forms of voting. Our system works for Georgia voters. That's why Fox News, CNN, Heritage, and the Bipartisan Policy Center gives us top marks. Let's expand our discussion on this now. Let's bring in Lauren Groh-Wargo, a CEO of the Fair Fight Action. Welcome to the show, Lauren.
Thank you so much for having me.
Lauren, when you hear the President of the United States talk about eliminating mail-in ballots altogether, what's your reaction on that?
Well, first of all, folks should think about the president's executive order strategy more like a press release strategy. These are his hopes and dreams and wishes. The president does not have control over how states run elections. He would like to have that control. I think it's pretty evident that Vladimir Putin was on American soil on Sunday, and they were publicly talking about trying to change election laws in our country. So we're calling this the Putin executive order, where in Russia, you don't have to have elections to know what the outcome is going to be. And I think Trump certainly is looking up to Putin in this regard. We have long expected this executive order around mail ballots, and we expect it to have a lot of other voter restrictions. But the president cannot unilaterally change how elections are run. So just like many of his other executive orders, we expect that to be partially or fully blocked in court. That doesn't mean this is not unbelievably dangerous rhetoric. Mail ballots are used by Republicans and Democrats in Georgia and across the country every year to safely cast their ballot. This is disinformation and lies, and it really is a bullying, intimidation tactic to try to force states to do what he wants. That's how we see this.
Yeah. Why do you think mail-in ballots is such a political flashpoint? I mean, you said both Republicans and Democrats use this. We've been using it for years now without controversy. Why is this such a flashpoint?
Well, what happened in 2020 is reminding everybody to put yourself back in those days, that was during COVID. And mail ballots were used more than ever before. And it was an election where Democrats voted for President Biden using mail ballots more than ever before. So we saw a spike in Democratic use of that vote method. And then Trump and the MAGA team started to make that vote method a partisan vote method. It's not a partisan vote method. In fact, it was Georgia Republicans who brought us mail voting here in Georgia and in many states. But because the 2020 margin was so close, you cannot understand this rhetoric of his without understanding him and his people's attempt to overturn the 2020 election. That is inherently tied to this disinformation and lies about mail voting because of huge Democratic use to put Joe Biden over the top in 2020. So we're here now in 2025, essentially relitigating that. And we've seen that here locally. You have the state election board in Georgia, the MAGA wing of it, asking the Trump operation to take another look at Fulton County 2020 results. There were many mail ballots. So as this Trump operation has come back into power, they are bringing back all of these lies again and really trying to force feed American election system, frankly, into a more autocratic model. That's why we're hearing his inspiration around the visit with Putin. It's not going to work. We and others are going to fight back. I have absolute certainty that he's going to end up in court over this executive order. But again, we take this very seriously because here we are today talking about it, right?
Yeah.
He's raising questions, raising disinformation about mail voting. And so this is not going to be a normal midterm. Look at the power grab they're trying to do in redrawing lines and taking Congress into one-party rule. They are throwing the kitchen sink at our entire electoral system to try to remake it in a Trump MAGA model.
Yeah, this comes on the eve of Georgia's deadline to get folks to check their voting status before potentially being purged from the voting rolls. How does the president's actions play in how trying to trim back who's allowed to vote?
They're inextricably linked. The lie around mail voting is also connected to their lie around voter fraud. Everybody, I'm sure, watching this remembers how Trump was saying both in 2016 and 2020. Remember his claims that millions of illegal immigrants were voting, which is inaccurate, right? There's been tons of audits, including in Georgia, that there is insignificant to be meaningless voter fraud. But their fundamental lie is that there's unclaimed voter rolls, and because of that, the vote methods are compromised in some way. And so that connects to these aggressive purges. There was a congressional hearing a couple of weeks ago about the voter rolls, led by a bunch of MAGA conspiracy theorists. So this is all part and parcel of the same argument, which at the base is that there's huge amounts of voter fraud, false, and that certain voting methods, mail voting, early voting, are fraudulent, false, towards this push to get really, really strict, documentary, expensive government IDs to be able to register to vote. They'd like to change those laws. There's a bill in Congress on that. And then to change voting methods. And their big push ultimately is to try to get everybody down to election day voting only, and then also change the rules on counting. They have an entire agenda. It's public. It's connected to Project 2025, which I'm now calling the Putin Project, because clearly this is also Putin's agenda for our country. But everybody should rest assured the president cannot change our laws, but we need everybody to get active. Check your voter registration status. Tell your friends and family to make sure that they're aware and registered and able to vote. Volunteer as a poll worker in your community. Democracy is not a spectator sport, and with this kind of dangerous rhetoric, it's going to take all of us to really ensure our elections.
All right, thanks so much. Really appreciate you joining us. We're out of time here.
Thanks
but we
for
can
having
talk to
me.
you all day. Thank you so much.